Fantastic. I can see that the recording is there. So, hello everybody. Just wanted to give a quick introduction to the session, and obviously you've probably had time to say hello to Helen and Gemma there. But this T-level Education and Early Years CPD session is looking specifically at the changes that are impacting obviously education and early years as a T-level, but more driven towards that new early years educator criteria. So we will be taking some time together just to reflect on that and what's changed, why is it changed, and more significantly, how is that going to impact the assessment of Assignment 2 Part 1 for those students that are enrolling with you on the T-level from September 24 that will be following an early years educator occupational specialism. So that's the idea. So it's quite a focused overview really, and to give you a heads up, because you'll hear things are changing, and then, you know, the questions are there, aren't they? Well, what's changing? What's it going to look like? And what difference is it going to make to me and my students? So I'm just going to check that we are okay with the tech. Can everybody hear me, etc.? Give me a thumbs up or something if things are going well. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, so here we are then. So I'm Janet King, I'm the Sector Manager for Education and Early Years, and today, as you already know, we're joined by Helen Scanlon, the Provider Development Team Manager, and Gemma McGregor, the Provider Development Officer. I don't know if you want to say hello. Gemma, do you want to come in and say hello?
I can indeed. Hello everybody, good afternoon, thank you for coming. So yes, I'm the Provider Development Officer for Education and Early Years now at NCFE. I'm fairly new to the team. Some of you I already know, but others I don't, so it's always nice to put a name to a face. I'm often with Janet and Helen on these events. We like to come together and sort of support our providers. So you'll get some contact details from me later on should you need them, but for now I'll hand back over to Janet.
Thank you. And Helen, have you already said hello? Do you want to pop back on?
I would love to pop back on and say hello. Hello, everybody. Helen Scanlon, if you haven't met myself, please use the chat function if you have any questions. Don't wait till the end, pop them in there, and then we can either answer them as we go, or we'll wait to the end, depending on where we're at. So hello, welcome, and thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so what's going on? And I think what's important to note that if you are coming up to your second year with a group of students now, that they will continue, as they go through that occupational specialism, they will continue to finish what they've started. So if you have students that are, you know, in their first year, be starting their second year in September this year, they will not be expected to change over to the new revised early years educator criteria as part of Assignment 2 Part 1 in the early years. They will most probably have made an excellent start already in terms of being assessed against those competency criteria within the Assignment 2 Part 1 in their placements. They will carry on and they will finish what they've started. This will have no disadvantage or detrimental impact to the qualification in terms of license to practice, full and relevant, and so on, because the registration date will have been started in September 23 and running for a 2-year period. So this does mean then, or is likely then to imply, that we're going to have a situation where our second years from September 24 are following the Assignment 2 Part 1 that we have become familiar with those competencies. And we'll have a group of first year students registering on the T-level in education and early years, those that are taking the occupational specialism in the early years educator, who will need, for the sake of keeping hold of that full and relevant and license to practice as it is known, they will need to follow the new early years educator criteria. So there is that implication, as there always is when things are in this transitional year, of second years finishing off one document And because the Department for Education have introduced the new criteria to be implemented from 24, and it's been approved, so we're good to go, but it will be implemented with your first years, and it is to no disadvantage to your current students. I just wanted to make that clear. So I know that some providers have asked, and they've been, they've been quite anxious about the work that's already been done with their current first years registered from September 23. They simply carry on and they finish. They do not need to complete the new EYE criteria documentation. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to have a look at what's changed and why, and think about perhaps the reasoning behind that. Why is it, what's similar, what's looking different, and to help with any questions that you might have. What I will say is the actual document that we're going to use for the new EYE criteria, whilst that's been approved, we're just waiting for IFAPE permission now to be able to upload that onto our website as a document for sharing. But I'll be able to talk you through exactly what we've done. Okay. So this is what we're hopefully going to achieve in our short session today. We're going to share the new EYE criteria and get a sense of what that means and the fact that it's coming. We're going to explore the changing landscape within education and early years qualifications, just to give us a sense of why these changes are happening. And then in particular, what have we done and what's the impact for the assessor and for the students following the early years educator occupational specialism when they complete their new assignment 2 part 1 from September 24. Okay, thank you. So something that we've just been discussing there was around students who have started in September 23. So they will have been registered for the T-level in September 23, but of course won't have confirmed which occupational specialism they're absolutely confirmed with until the late stages of this term in 23 or in the early stages from September 24. I just wanted to confirm that anything that a student does will be associated with the initial registration period. So those students who will be going into their second year in their occupational specialism will carry on doing the current assignment 2 part 1, the one that they will have been looking at and being observed against and having those professional discussions about from when they first started their placement in 2023. So no need to worry about those students. They will finish what they started, and it will just be from September 24 that new students will use the new version of the assignment 2 part 1 in line with the implementation of those criteria. Just going to, no problem, going to hand over to Gemma, and we're going to do a Slido without a Slido. Over to you, Gemma.
Indeed, a Slido without a Slido, the wonders of modern technology. So in true NCFE CPD fashion, we'd just like to get a sense from everybody about their confidence levels around these changes to the EYE criteria. Now, obviously, they're new, things are changing, but from what you know already, if you could think about a scale from 1 to 10, how confident do you feel about these changes being implemented and how you might implement them in terms of assignment 2.1? So by that, I mean 1 being not at all confident and 10 being very confident. Where would you currently put yourself? And if you could just pop it into the chat, please, in the absence of a Slido. Okay, so we've got quite a spread. Everybody seems to be. Right, excellent. So we've got an 8 there. That's good. We've got a few 1s, 3s midway. So it's quite a spread really, Janet, isn't it?
Yeah,
We've got all the way across the scale there. For those of you that feel least confident, about it, which is absolutely fine. It's new. Things are changing as they always do in education as a whole. They never stay the same for long, do they? Would you say that that's because you don't know much about it yet, or you feel less confident in applying it in terms of the assignment 2.1? If you just want to put a couple of comments in the chat, that would be great. Excellent.
I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but it says that I can't send any messages because I'm not a member of the chat. Is that something my end or your end?
Oh, I don't know, Samantha. That's an exceptionally good question. The Teams is being utterly delightful to us today. It really is. Don't worry, Samantha, if you can't comment. As long as you're having to think about it in the background, that's great.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Right, so again, a lot of people saying, Janet, that they're just not quite sure what they are yet. Not enough information yet. Oh, that's good. Could be higher when I'm a bit more informed. Hopefully, by the end of this afternoon, we'll get those scores up. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand back over to Janet and we'll come back to the confidence scores at the end.
Sorry, can I just ask, how would we have known? Because I signed up to today because it's not been published yet, because I don't know anything. So I'm wondering how these other people did know before.
I think what the confidence levels are showing, Charlotte, is not necessarily an awareness of what those criteria specifically are, but maybe an awareness of what assignment 2 part 1 is and what is being observed, what's being expected from the students, and how those criteria from the DFE have been revised. So it's possible, you know, to have seen that on a DFE website and things like that. But the documentation from NCFE, you've missed nothing, because we are waiting for IFATE to say that we can actually publish that on our website. So I'm just literally going to talk to you about it. So you've not missed anything, Charlotte, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody for popping those in the chat, and I'm going to try and not get distracted because I want to read what you're saying, but I'm purposely not going to look now. But keep those comments coming because I know Gemma and Helen are keeping their eye on that. So first of all, I just wanted to take a deep breath with you all and say, wow, everything seems to be going on at the moment. There seems to be so many changes, so much going on, and a lot that's impacting further education, especially with our younger students at the moment. And some of those reasons, and most of those reasons, are down to a reform. And that reform is simply about all qualifications in the education and early years provision for 16 to 19s that currently exist and that are currently ESFA funded will begin to see that funding being removed from September 24. And so more students will be seeing that option of T-level apprenticeship, general education with the A-levels. Now, as well as all that going on, because that was enough to get our heads around, certainly it was enough to get my head around. So as well as all of that, we've had a trailblazer group that have come together and met to revise and refresh the level 3 standard. And as we know, that level 3 standard that makes up the apprenticeship for the early years educator is also the basis of the early years educator occupational specialism. So we've had to be mindful of that. And at the same time, we've also had the Department for Education refreshed, because it was the best opportunity, but it's just meant everything's come at once, but to refresh the early years educator criteria. And the DFE list of criteria are the areas that, as an awarding organisation, when we're writing qualifications that are part of an early years educator qualification, those criteria need to be met. So they need to be embedded. And what we've done in the T-level currently and what we have done now in preparation for September 24 is look at that DFE criteria and create a new assignment 2 part 1, but using absolutely the same approach and methodologies in terms of observation, professional discussion, and how the criteria are to be met. So it's in exactly the same way. You will observe, you will do professional discussion, but they are different criteria. And so it's important for you to have this heads up that when you see the documentation in the next few weeks or so, that you will understand and appreciate that that is what will be used with your new students from September 24 in their placements when you're doing the observations and the criteria. So we needed to be working on that, and we've been working on that for a while because that needed to go to the DFE to be approved, and then once approved it could make sure that this T-level education and early years EYE occupational specialism or pathway I think they call it, on that qualification list that lists all of the qualifications that are full and relevant with that license to practice in ratio at level 3. It ensures that this qualification will be on there. So it was really important that we got that done first before we were then able to talk to you about what we'd done. Because if that hadn't got approved and we had to do more work on it, then it might have changed what we're going to be talking about today. So that's why we've had to do what we've done, and it's an appreciation of the immense change that's going on in the sector, and I just wanted to take a breath really to talk to you about that. And the other thing to note, if you're not aware, is that students who are finishing their T-level in education and early years, going on to work in ratio, you probably are already aware that the requirement for mathematics to work in level 3 ratio has been removed. And so, you know, if students, I know you'll be wanting to, for various reasons, those students are continuing with their mathematical learning as is good for them. But if they don't achieve at their level 2, then they can still progress into the workplace at level 3 and continue their career in that way. To be a manager in an early years setting, you do need to have your level 2 mathematics. So that's something that can be gained in industry, you know, whilst these students are new members of staff. But it's just something to note that then just to clear any confusion up around that is that students do not need to have their maths to work at level 3, just in case anybody was wondering. Okay, thank you. So let's just put some of that into perspective then and think about how students are training. What's the educational landscape looking like? So younger students there, when they're doing technical educational, vocational education, they're doing a T-level or they're doing an apprenticeship. Now adults, I don't want to confuse us too much with adults, but adults will continue to do competency-based occupational entry qualifications, and there will be the opportunity to do higher technical qualifications also. Going to concentrate today on what's happening within that T-level world. We know that the Trailblazer Group have amended the standard. We know that the Department for Education have revised, refreshed, and are implementing new EYE criteria from September 24. And we know that there have been some changes to the EYFS, predominantly in terms of ratio and mathematics. Also, some other changes that all come down to the manager's discretion in terms of a student studying at level 3 can, at the manager's discretion, be used at level 2, be used in ratio at a level lower than the program they're studying. You know, and I know that's not always the best thing to do, and it should always be, especially as they're your students, there should always be communication around any intention to do that because you know your student best. But just to say, that's what's going on in the EYFS as well. Thanks, Gemma. So the EYE criteria, as always, we have got those 6 basic areas. Plan and provide effective early years education that enables children to progress and prepares them for school. Support children with special educational needs and disability. Safeguarding, health, well-being and safety. Work in partnership with the key person, colleagues, parents, carers or other professionals and agencies, and our own role and practice and development. So there's lots of, if we were here now as a group and we wanted to think about these different aspects and different criteria, we know that we would be keeping all of the things that are on here now. We also need to appreciate that that new criteria has got sub-criteria living underneath it. So it's good to see that SEND has been brought out and given that all importance of a main area rather than being part of another one. And there will be lots of different sub-criteria underneath all of this. Now, by doing that, and by breaking down some of this criteria, when you first look at the new document, when it is published over the next few weeks, you will notice, if you compare, this is what the students are doing September 23 to 25, this is what my students will be doing as first years from September 24 in assignment 2 part 1, that there are, or it would be perceived to be, that there are many more criteria in this new documentation. And that is because the DfE have responded to feedback around standardisation. So they've looked at the feedback that they did. They did a consultation. They had a consultation period, and a lot of the feedback that came back was around that standardisation and around the vagueness sometimes and the interpretation of the existing EYE criteria. So whilst it may feel that there is more criteria to observe or to have a discussion around for the students to meet, in reality, what's happened is that that criteria has been broken down. So you'll be meeting that criteria at the same time, but it is just in a more straightforward and logical way that perhaps mitigates the risk of, lack of standardization or open to greater interpretation.
I think now's a great time, Janet, to feedback some of the comments, if that's all right with you.
Yes, please.
So we've had a couple of comments from Nicola in the chat. The placement assessments appear to need more time for writing up. I've seen that assessors are taking more than 3 hours to record their observations and then logging dictaphone discussions. This seems excessive. And why are there 12 elements crammed into 1 year and then the submission for year 2 is May?
Okay, thank you. So I will take some of those questions. I'll break that question down. Very good question, so thank you. Thinking about the T-level as a whole and those 12 elements, there's a knowledge base of those 12 elements. Whilst the delivery model is up to you, I understand and absolutely appreciate, and it is typical that most providers, if not all providers, are doing those 12 elements in year 1. The thematic schemes of work hopefully give an indication of where there is crossover and where there is overlap and where things can be taught together. And I do think and know from comments that we're gathering now that the familiarity, of course, helps to improve and encourage that sort of efficiency in the teaching and learning side of things. But I appreciate what you're saying. There's a lot, that's a fact. And when we think about the placement side of things, I think this is where we're concentrating right now, and this is what we're thinking about at the moment, that actually we just wanted you to have a heads up of what was going to be on that website soon in terms of, will my role as an assessor change? It won't. You will, if you've got second years and first years, there'll be that little bit of different sort of paperwork. If assessors are taking that long to write up, and if it's taking them you know, a long time to be able to do that, that is something that we can talk about. And I think it might be something that's really useful as part of our network with the moderators, because I think they might be able to share some hints and tips and be able to really help and support with any different ways that they've seen that happening. So that might be something, Helen and Gemma, that we can put to an aside and talk about there, because it's a very good and valid point, and we need to make sure you know, that the assessors are protected in this way, because as I say, there are going to be more criteria. So the reason I'm saying that that criteria is perceived to be more, even though when you see it, you say, well, Janet, there are more. And what we've done to try and mitigate that is put that criteria into themes. So where we've got those 6 broad areas, the subheadings, for example, of, thank you, Gemma, the subheadings for number 1 on there are divided into an A, B, C, and D area. So there's lots of different criteria, but they're all belonging into a main topic area of child development, for example, or curriculum, or partnership working, or reflective practice. And so we've taken that criteria and arranged it so that the assessor and the student, when planning, can have a look at the thematic areas and decide then on what will be best to be seen. And that was, to us, that was the best way of helping the assessor with just that, really, when we talk about the time and the efficiencies and so on, and making sure that we were keeping things as logical and straightforward as possible. Now, I know you want to see the document, and we will be sharing that document as soon as we possibly can. But what we didn't want, I certainly didn't want something to go on the website and you be taken by surprise, or thinking, oh, I've got to do this now because it says from September 24. That is for new students. It's going to be a document that looks at all of that EYE criteria, and in the same way as the existing Assignment 2 Part 1 breaks down that criteria, the new version will also do that, but by using some broader topic areas to give that thematic feel, to help assessors to be able to see where things might be assessed, you know, at the same time, because it'll be naturally occurring. So I just wanted to give you a heads up of that. Any more questions or comments? I think we had some more Slidos and some things for you as well, Gemma, in there.
Yeah, there were. I think we'll probably avoid the Slidos in the event that they're not going to necessarily work. However,
questions.
Yeah, questions. And we've also got some links that Janet's got to share with you that you might find useful to go away and read a little bit more should you need to. So, questions, Janet. Are there any examples of observations and professional discussions for 2.1?
Yes, what we have got some grade, I can never say it, I want to say GSEMs, but the specification examples, why don't we just call it that? So we do have those, and they are available on the website. So I don't know if we can find a link and just pop that in or add it to the slide. And also, again, coming to those assessor networks, I think the next one's on, I want to say the 3rd of July, but it will be on our upcoming events, won't it? Where you meet the moderators, and they'll be able to talk to you about the specific things that might have been tricky criteria, you know, so where we're looking 1.1, for example, in the current Assignment 2 Part 1, is that one that asks the student to talk about all the different stages and sequences in lots of different areas, and it's a massive criteria, and so, you know, those are the sorts of things that we bring to those networks to discuss, and everything. So in answer to that, it will be looking at how how can that student demonstrate what they're doing with the children, the babies and children that they are working with, the age range that they're working with now, and how might they adapt it for older children or for different areas of the EYFS, for different areas of development, depending on what that criteria is. So we're not expecting students to have a script to be able to talk to us about what those different stages and sequences are, or different areas of learning and development, but to be able to apply what they do now in practice against the criteria and that breadth and differentiation of what the criteria is asking.
Thanks for that, Janet. Just looking through. So the comments so far have been that the grade exemplars are for assignment 2 part 2 for the structured obs rather than 2.1, which is the competency based observations.
Okay, well there is something on the current assignment 2 part 1. And if you look at the observation criteria, the way we've got the justification, and that will probably give you some guide as to what you're looking for in terms of competence and not yet competent. And so, you know, you're looking at that student's progress over time. But if you have anything specifically, you've got, I think the emails will be on the PowerPoint there. And so you can definitely get in touch with me about any particular criteria, or have a little think about which ones are the most challenging and tricky, and we can absolutely make sure that that's brought to the attention of our moderators. They will be the best people to be able to say, these are the examples we've seen when we've been carrying out moderation against assignment 2 part 1. So I think they will give you the best examples, really, if I'm honest.
And Janet, yes, you were right with the next event being in July. So it is the Tuesday, the 2nd of July, and I've popped the link in the chat so that everybody can access that if they'd like to register for that. So that is the Education and Early Years Assessors and Teachers Network. They've been really successful so far. There's been a lot of top tips shared, and there's also a video on our YouTube playlist around this as well, which I'll share in a second. Couple of more comments there, Janet. So there are level 2 SEND outcomes that our full-time students struggle to achieve as they're not employed at the setting. This new SEND element worries me in case it's like the outcomes in level 2.
Really good comment. Absolutely understand that. And a lot of whilst it was absolutely wonderful to and right to see that SEND had been given an area all of its own by the DFE, it also concerned me as well that, okay, what are we expecting our students to be able to do? Because for lots of reasons, and for lots of appropriate and right reasons, students don't always have that access to be able to work with a child who's following a graduated approach program. You know, they don't necessarily engage in that wider professional network and so on, and that could be for the very right reasons from a child-centered point of view. So what we did, we looked at that criteria, and we've made sure, and it was kind of, I suppose one of the reasons we wanted to get the submission to DFE in early was the fact that we'd made sure that it was accessible. So they might well be referring to documentation, policies, approaches, shadowing somebody, explaining how things might happen rather than actually doing it. So whilst this is part of a skills framework, it is very much about how is it applied in your setting. These are the sorts of things that the students will be expected to do. What would happen if, you know, and what sorts of policies are being followed there? Working with other professionals, thinking about what kind of professionals might be involved and so on. So The other one, of course, is when we're working in partnership with parents. This is also something that can be tricky and challenging for students to achieve. So we've made sure that the students are able to do that with the verb and the way that the level of demand has been set for the students to achieve that criteria. Also, when we explore these things and when that new assignment 2 part 1 hits the ground from September 24, we'll also work with you on things that might be tricky. It's going to be brand new, but the criteria is very similar, and we've really tried hard to make sure that when you're assessing, you can assess it in a logical way, because things have been grouped together, taking the planning stage and going back to the paperwork and how long that's taking, which I really empathize with. Then maybe by grouping them like this in this holistic way, rather than having them in the order that they appear, is going to help with that, help the student to plan, and also help the assessor to do things in a more timely manner. But please look at that criteria when it does come your way, and if there's anything where you feel your students are going to find that tricky, then do get back to us, because we've really tried to be able to mitigate that, and if we haven't got that right, then open to discussion or to explain a way to work around that.
Lovely, thanks, Janet. I think Nicola's just typing, so as she's doing that, I think I'll jump in, and I might ask Helen if she could move on to, we'll avoid Slido, move on to the next slide, just with the useful websites. Thanks, Helen. These are just some useful links that Janet's shared with you, just in the event that you might want to go away and find out a little bit more. So there's some stuff directly from the DFE on there that might give you a little bit more background before anything that NCFE released kind of hits the website or hits your inbox. Oh, it was just a thank you, Nicola, you're welcome. Just because obviously that isn't our NCFE. Yes, I can put those in the chat, Sharon. Yes, no problem. I can copy those and pop them in the chat. Not a problem at all.
We'll pop those into the chat. Yeah. Shall I just say what they are? I can talk through them if you want, Gemma.
Yeah, you can. Would you? I don't know whether I can.
Oh, you don't need to open them. I'll just
explain
what they are.
Fantastic. Thanks, Janet.
Okay, so that first one there is the link to the Early Years Foundation stage. So you'll be able to look at that. When you look at the statutory framework now, you'll also notice that there are two approaches. So they've got a document for childminders and a document for group and school-based providers. And IFATE are very much aware, so the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, who own the T-level, are very much aware that we have focused everything around the group and the child, the group care version of the EYFS. So your students don't need to know the ins and outs of the childminder one. And also, if you were interested in what the changes have been to the level 3 standard, the occupational standard on which the OS, the occupational specialism in T-level, too many S's and O's here going on, has been revised. There's a link to the apprenticeship standard there, and there is also the link to that new EYE criteria that the DFE have published on that final link there. So you'll be able to see what I mean when I say there's 6 broad areas, but actually under each one there are many sub-criteria. And when you first look at that, especially number 1, because it's got 1, A, B, C, D, and then you've got the rest of those big main headings. Underneath all of that sub-criteria, there's lots of information. But when you read it, you'll see, as assessors, if you've been doing EYE criteria previously and you've been observing students on placement previously, then you'll see the familiarity and the similarity, and the fact that actually it's just been broken down to take away and mitigate any interpretation. Sorry, Gemma, thank you.
All right, the links have gone in the chat now if you want to access them, but I can always email them to everybody as well, just so you've got them. That's not a problem. Last one, I think then, Janet, any idea when the new assignment will appear on the website?
This is what we all need, and this is what we want to see. And it did cross my mind that do we just share it? And then I thought, actually, it's got draft written all over it, and you won't remember it. But basically, it's going to look exactly like the other one in terms of observation, professional discussion, what needs to be observed, what can be discussed, examples of competence and not yet achieved. It will be, what is different is that it will be thematically arranged for that efficiency, so that you're thinking, oh, if I'd have known that was coming, especially when you're looking at these for the first time. I've seen that already, but I didn't realise because I didn't plan for that. Then everything is done in those thematic areas to help with that planning. And we're hoping, this is the $6 million question, we are hoping that that is going to be published on our website in the next couple of weeks. We know that the DFE have approved it. We know that it's not going to have any changes. We just need now permission to be able to put that onto our website, and we're seeking that as we speak. So fingers crossed, but we just didn't want you to see that appear and think, what's this? So this is a kind of heads up. You will see this, but it is only for those students from September 24.
Thanks, Janet. That's great. So not long to wait. And I guess once that kind of lands on the website, it'll help put all the jigsaw pieces together for everybody, hopefully. With that in mind, I'm now going to ask you, and I know a lot of you sort of maybe weren't aware this was coming or weren't quite aware of what was going on, but if I was to ask you now, how confident you feel in terms of things moving forward and the changes that are about to happen, would you say you feel slightly more prepared as things are going? So again, on a scale of 1 to 10, we'll see if we've got any change. And if again, pop it in the chat for me, that'd be fantastic. Sarah, I think you've gone up. That makes me feel good. I think you've gone up. Fantastic. 7 more prepared. Thank you. This is great. Oh, I'm pleased. This is good. So I think ultimately everybody feels a little bit more like at least they know that something's coming. Charlotte says she feels more knowledgeable but worried that there's even more criteria.
I know, Charlotte, and I do fully appreciate that, because when I looked at the list when it first came, I thought, oh, when you first look, you think there's a lot more, but then when you look and you take, because I had to calm myself down, take a step back, reflect, look at them sort of side by side and think, actually, they've put that there, it's kind of gone a little bit like that, but broken down. So it feels as though there's more, but actually it's just telling you a little bit more as to what's really required. So I don't think there is more. It will all sort of live together, but I really do think putting them in their little groups will really help with that efficiency, because I know how hard as assessors are working to be able to get to all of those students and to be able to do the fantastic job that you're doing to meet that criteria and ultimately to make a difference in the quality interactions with babies and children. So hopefully it won't appear that there is more work. It's just that more might be able to be seen in the same in the way that you're observing right now.
That's a really good comment. I've just started as an assessor and we've just got through first year, so I was really looking forward to being more in the know next year, and it's changing again.
Oh,
it's kind of the nature of education, I think, isn't it? Yeah. And Nicola says it would be really useful if we could have access to a moderator before the students are registered on their OS to support. We don't want to get to the second year and find out we're doing it wrong.
Fully agree. Now, I'm going to take both of those questions one at a time. So was it Charlotte who mentioned about things changing? No.
Yes.
Who's been assessing
Charlotte
for the first time. So absolutely, Charlotte, but the principals are exactly the same. So you'll be using different paperwork, granted, but the principles of what you're doing and the way that you're, the model and the approach will be absolutely the same. So you're going to be fine. And yes, I was just going to say to Helen, you will be able to come along to that Assessor network. Make sure you come along to that, regardless of the stage that you're at, because you can meet the moderation team. And the moderators are so lovely, so generous with the information that they share. And they've got some really good case studies that they talk about. So I think that will be really useful. And don't forget, they also will be using this paperwork for the first time, which is why when it was being developed, I made sure that I communicated with them, we liaised with them, we worked together to make sure that any feedback or any challenges, we were trying to mitigate those in this new version as well. So hopefully things will be better moving forward as well in that aspect. But meeting the moderators has certainly been a great step forward in that reassurance. Is it the 2nd or 3rd of July? I'm not quite sure.
It's the 2nd, I think.
Okay, good.
Just double checking, but I've popped the events link in the chat again for anybody that may have missed it at the beginning.
And apologies, so I keep saying it's the 3rd. I mean, I'll be here.
Thank goodness for that, Janet. So yeah, so it is the 2nd. If you click on the events booking link, it'll take you through, and everything's broken down by month, and you can just find the event that you're interested in, and there's a little registration form, and then you'll get an invitation to join the teams. There is another CPD session coming up as well, which I think is on one of the next slides, Helen. Which is preparing students for debates and discussions, which is a little bit more ESP related potentially, but that's the next CPD event that's coming up. We had a Slido in between, so which isn't playing ball today. So yeah, there is more CPD events coming up, and you can find them all by month. We have tried to make them at different sort of times during the day so that they're accessible for people, but as Helen and Janet would say, in the meantime, if there's anything else, do get in touch. Helen also pointed out that there are videos on our YouTube playlist. I have popped the link to that in the chat as well, and there is a Assessor network recording on there from a previous session that's sort of already live for you to watch. But thanks for that, Helen. This slide shows you what our events page looks like a bit. So each event comes up looking like this. Click the register now. It'll give you a nice little form to fill in. They're not too long, I promise. And then it will register you for those events. If you register and then something happens and you can't come along, don't worry, they are recorded, just like this one, and they will appear on our playlist. Lastly, unless anybody's got any further questions, I always ask that, and then there's either a torrent or everyone seems quite happy for now. On the screen, you'll see a QR code. If you've got a smartphone, we'd really appreciate it if you could scan it and fill in the evaluation for today. It really helps us develop sessions moving forward, helps us make sure that we're giving you things that you find current, relevant and useful. Obviously, with this session, there will be follow-up from this. So while Janet's given you a sort of an overview, this isn't it. We promise there will be further sort of development along this theme so you can get further support. And contact us by all means. Contact Helen, myself or Janet if you've got any questions. If we can answer them, we will. If it's something that we need to sort of pass on to our moderation team, we can equally do that as well. Don't know if you've anything else to add, Helen or Janet, that we might have missed. Oh, got a message, another comment in the chat from Nicola, which says, I've just got first years at the moment. I found the current EYE we are using, especially the knowledge-based ones, the students haven't been taught yet and won't be until year 2. So it's been hard to cover a lot of it. Will that be the same with the new EYE or easier to plan with the topics?
Good question, Nicole. And I'm hoping that with those topics, you can be a little bit more aligned to what's going on in the environment, in the teaching and learning environment. It's really difficult to say what you know, you should look for and what you should plan to see and in what order, because delivery will be different across the different providers, of course. And we have to put that criteria, you almost see it as here it is, and you're observing in that holistic way and planning to make sure that you're covering everything, obviously. So hopefully the topics will help, and you'll be able to think about what you know what you're seeing within. Let's say if it was health and safety, there may be aspects of health and safety that the student has been learning about, been thinking about in the classroom environment, that it is then a logical thing to follow that up and bring that theory and practice together. So at least you'll be able to look within the topics for the aspects that the student might feel the most confident with. But it's that application of knowledge through their placement, through the assignment to part 1, and hopefully building on their knowledge rather than, as you say, looking for something that they haven't got that grounding in. I appreciate that that's difficult. Hopefully it'll make life easier.
I thought it'll be easier to chat rather than type again. I think
Thanks, Nicole.
Because we're new and we're only first years, obviously every tutor has been so focused trying to get their head around it. We've all been so separate. Yeah. So you're just trying to get on with it yourself, but then you come into an observation and you're like, oh, well, we haven't learned that yet. And I'm like, oh, but obviously we don't know that. So yeah. I've been trying to, like, for the students down the side of all the EYEs, write the element as well, so then they know what work to go to refer to and things. So yeah, it's been hard. But
yeah, no, that's a really good point, Nicole, I think. And when we look at the topics, whilst it doesn't necessarily in that document say which elements they're related to, I think it will be more obvious, so it will ease that planning, literally because things on the EYFS and the areas of learning will all be together, legislation will all be together, partnership will all be together, and that more or less is going to be something that's relatable to those elements. So I think it'll make planning easier. I certainly hope so.
I think we've got time for one last question, and it's from Nicola, who says, are there any plans to revise the year 1 elements?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so the elements as they are, and the technical qualification as it is, has gone through its annual TQ process. So that will also be something that's published. Those tweaks are minor, so there's nothing for you to be too concerned about or anxious about at all. But yes, every year the qualification goes through its natural review process with us, with providers, and also with iFate. So again, that will be available soon, but nothing for you to be too concerned about.
Brilliant. Thanks, Janet. Unless there's anything you'd like to add or anything Helen can think of that we may have missed.
I'm just looking at Mandy's comment there. I made the point to learners, when given assessment plans, to talk to placements to support them a lot. Yeah, absolutely. I think that relationship with our placement mentors is crucial, isn't it, to being able to get this right and to developing that confidence as well for structured observations 1, 2 and 3 in that second year. So yeah, so just wanted, don't worry when you see it, don't worry. Reflect on that new documentation. We'll be following that up, and hopefully we'll be able to really go through that in that Assessor network on the 2nd of July also, to be able to share that. But don't panic when you see it. That's for September 24. It's the same model, it's the same approach, but it's something that needed to happen because it needed, obviously, we want our students to achieve that qualification that gives them that license to practice at level 3. So it's something that needed to happen.
Yes, so that evaluation's on the screen. If you get 2 seconds to do that, we'd really appreciate it. And also, if you're watching this back as a recording, you can still use that QR code, and we'd really appreciate any feedback. We'd love to see you at the next event, which, yes, Janet, the 2nd around the new criteria. I'd just like to say thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much, Janet and Helen, for your input as well. And I think we will sign off for this evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.